It was a quiet morning in late autumn. The sun barely peeked over the horizon, casting a soft golden light through the trees that lined the small suburban neighborhood. Inside a modest home at the end of the cul-de-sac, a 4-year-old boy named Jacob sat at the kitchen table, swinging his legs back and forth beneath his chair. His hands gripped the edge of the table as he watched his stepmother, Lily, busy herself at the counter. Lily was pouring a cup of coffee, her movements slow and deliberate, as if she were trying to gather her thoughts. She had always been a gentle presence in Jacob's life. Though she wasn't his biological mother, she had come into his life when he was just 2, and in the 2 years since, she had grown to love him as if he were her own. Jacob, still too young to fully understand the complexity of family relationships, simply loved her in return with the unguarded affection only a child could offer. Today, however, was different. There was an unusual tension in the air, one that Jacob couldn't quite place. He'd noticed it from the moment he woke up. The house had been filled with quiet murmurs, with Lily and his father, Mark, speaking in hushed tones while they prepared for something. A big day, his father had said, but Jacob wasn't sure what that meant. His father entered the kitchen, adjusting the cuff of his dress shirt. He looked tired, but happy, his eyes glinting with a mixture of nerves and excitement. "Ready, buddy?" Mark asked, ruffling Jacob's hair as he passed by him. "Ready for what, Daddy?" Jacob asked, his wide, innocent eyes following his father's every move. Mark crouched down to be at eye level with his son. "Today's a special day, Jakey. You know how I told you Lily and I were going to have a big celebration? Well, today's the day we get married. And you're a very important part of it." Jacob tilted his head. "What's married mean?" Mark smiled gently. "It means Lily and I are going to promise to always take care of each other, just like we take care of you. We're becoming a family. Forever." The word family was familiar to Jacob, but the concept of forever was still a bit foggy in his young mind. But he nodded, because if his daddy said it was important, then it was. And he liked Lily? No, he loved her. In his own small world, she had always been there, helping him tie his shoes, reading him bedtime stories, and comforting him when he had bad dreams. Lily knelt down beside them, her eyes soft as she looked at Jacob. "And you, sweetie, are a big part of our family. That's why I wrote something special just for you." Jacob blinked at her. "Wrote something?" She smiled, brushing a strand of her light brown hair behind her ear. "Yes, I wrote a promise for you, too. Do you want to hear it today?" Jacob wasn't sure what to expect, but he nodded again, feeling a mixture of curiosity and anticipation. The afternoon arrived, and the backyard of their home had been transformed into a small, intimate wedding venue. Friends and close family members gathered under a large oak tree, which had been adorned with simple yet elegant decorations. Fairy lights hung in the branches, casting a warm glow over the gathering as the sun began its slow descent. Jacob clung to his father's hand, feeling a little overwhelmed by the number of people. He didn't know most of them, but they all smiled at him as they passed by, offering him soft words of encouragement. He stayed close to his father's side, watching as Lily appeared in her dress, a beautiful flowing gown that seemed to sparkle in the fading daylight. When she stepped forward, Mark's face lit up with love and pride. Jacob could feel it, the way his father's hand tightened slightly around his own, as if this moment meant everything to him. The ceremony began, and though Jacob didn't understand most of the words being said, he knew they were important. His father and Lily held hands, looking into each other's eyes as they exchanged vows. Promises, his father had called them. Promises to love, to cherish, to support each other for the rest of their lives. Then came the part Jacob hadn't expected. Lily turned to him, kneeling down so that she was at his level. She reached out and took his small hands in hers, her eyes brimming with emotion. "Jakey," she began, her voice soft but steady. "I've been thinking a lot about what it means to be a family. You see, when I met your daddy, I knew he was someone I wanted to spend my life with. But when I met you, I realized that my life wouldn't be complete without you too." Jacob's lips parted slightly, unsure of what to say. He wasn't used to people talking to him like this, with such seriousness and love all wrapped together. "I want to make a promise to you today," Lily continued, her voice growing a little shakier as her emotions threatened to spill over. "I promise to love you, to care for you, to always be there when you need me. I promise to be the best stepmom I can be, not just for your daddy, but for you too. I will always protect you, always listen to you, and I will never stop being someone you can count on." Jacob felt his throat tighten, a strange sensation for someone so young. His bottom lip quivered as he looked into Lily's eyes. He didn't fully understand all the words she was saying, but he understood the feeling. He could feel the love pouring out of her, wrapping around him like a warm hug. Before he realized it, tears were welling up in his eyes. He sniffled, trying to blink them away, but they only kept coming. His small hands tightened around hers as he looked up at his father, who was watching them with tears in his own eyes. Mark crouched down beside them, placing a comforting hand on Jacob's back. "It's okay, buddy. It's okay to cry." Jacob nodded, wiping at his face with the back of his hand, but the tears didn't stop. They weren't sad tears, though. He didn't feel sad. It was a feeling he couldn't quite name, but it was warm and safe and filled with a sense of belonging. Lily reached out and wiped a tear from his cheek, her own eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I love you, Jakey, and I always will." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Jacob threw his arms around her neck, burying his face in her shoulder as he sobbed quietly. He didn't know why he was crying, but he knew one thing for sure. He was happy, happier than he had ever been. As Lily hugged him back, holding him close, Jacob's world felt whole. He had his daddy, and now, in the deepest way he could imagine, he had her too. The ceremony ended with laughter and applause, but it was the quiet moment shared between the three of them that remained the most vivid. Throughout the rest of the evening, as guests mingled and celebrated, Jacob stayed close to Lily and Mark. He didn't feel the need to wander off and play, not when his heart was so full. Later that night, as the stars twinkled overhead and the last of the guests had departed, Jacob found himself sitting between his father and Lily on the porch steps. His head rested against Lily's shoulder, and his tiny hand held tightly to his father's. The three of them sat in comfortable silence, basking in the quiet peace of the moment. "You did great today, Jakey," Mark said softly, brushing his fingers through Jacob's hair. Jacob looked up at his father, his eyes still a little puffy from crying earlier. "Did I?" Lily smiled, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. "You were perfect." For the first time in his young life, Jacob felt like everything was exactly as it should be. He didn't understand every part of what had happened, but he didn't need to. All that mattered was that they were together. His daddy, his Lily, and him. And in that moment, he knew that he was loved. Forever. After that unforgettable day, life seemed to settle into a new rhythm, but in Jacob's eyes, everything had changed. He no longer felt the strange separation between his father and Lily. She was no longer just the nice lady who lived with them and helped him with little things. She was, in every way that mattered, part of him now. The days passed quickly, filled with the normalcy of family life. But also something more, something stronger. There were the usual routines, like breakfast at the kitchen table, where Jacob would sit with his legs still swinging, watching Lily make her special pancakes with blueberries shaped like smiley faces. There were evenings where Mark would come home from work, sweep Lily into a kiss, and then scoop Jacob up in his arms, spinning him around while laughter filled the house. But even in the little things, Jacob felt the bond between them grow. The way Lily would bend down to help him tie his shoes, or how she remembered the exact way he liked his stuffed animals arranged on his bed. The way she listened to him, really listened, when he talked about his day at preschool, even if it was about the smallest, silliest things. She always seemed to have time for him, as if every word he said mattered. One rainy afternoon, Jacob sat by the window, watching the drops patter against the glass. He had a box of crayons in front of him, and a half-finished drawing spread out on the table. He was trying to draw his family, his dad, Lily, and himself. But something didn't feel right. He frowned, his little hand pausing over the paper. Lily walked into the room, drying her hands on a dish towel. She noticed his thoughtful expression and sat down next to him. "What's on your mind, sweetie?" Jacob bit his lip, staring down at the drawing. "I'm trying to draw us, but I don't know how to make it look like a real family." Lily smiled softly, leaning in to look at the paper. "It looks pretty real to me." "But—" Jacob hesitated. "It's missing something." Lily tilted her head, studying the picture for a moment. "Do you think it needs something else? Maybe some color here?" She pointed to the sky, suggesting a bright sun to chase away the gray clouds. Jacob shook his head. "No, it's not that. It's just—" He looked up at her, his innocent eyes wide. "What if people don't know we're a real family? You and Daddy are married now, but I'm not really your son, right?" The question hit Lily hard, but she didn't let it show. Instead, she reached out and gently took his hand, giving it a squeeze. "Jakey, family isn't about who's related by blood. It's about love and how much we care for each other. You and I might not have the same last name, but in every way that matters, you are my son. And I am your mom, if that's what you want." Jacob's face lit up with surprise. "I can call you Mom?" Lily's heart swelled, her voice thick with emotion as she replied, "If that's what makes you happy, then yes, you can call me Mom." Jacob's grin spread across his face like sunlight breaking through the clouds. "Mom," he whispered, testing out the word, letting it settle on his tongue. It felt right. It felt perfect. From that day forward, Lily wasn't just Lily to Jacob anymore. She was his mom, and he called her that with all the pride and love his little heart could muster. Years passed, and the family continued to grow in ways Jacob hadn't expected. Lily and Mark had another child, a little girl named Emma, who Jacob adored from the moment she was born. He was a doting big brother, always watching over her with the same kind of protectiveness that Lily had shown him. Even as Jacob grew older, the memory of that wedding day stayed with him. He would often look back on the moment Lily read her vows to him, remembering how loved and secure it made him feel. It was a foundation that shaped the rest of his childhood, giving him a sense of belonging that nothing could shake. One evening, when Jacob was about 10 years old, he sat in the living room with his dad, Lily, and Emma, who was now a lively 4-year-old, much like Jacob had been when he first met Lily. They were all watching a family movie, huddled together on the couch with a bowl of popcorn between them. During a quiet moment, Jacob turned to Lily, who was stroking Emma's hair as the little girl dozed off in her lap. "Mom?" Lily smiled, her eyes warm and attentive as always. "Yes, sweetheart." "I was thinking about that day," Jacob said, his voice soft, almost hesitant. "The day you and Dad got married." Lily raised an eyebrow, curious. "You remember that?" "Yeah," Jacob nodded. his gaze dropping to his hands. I remember you reading those vows to me. It meant a lot. I never told you that before. Lily's heart fluttered at his words. She reached out, gently lifting his chin so he would look at her. You don't have to say anything, Jakey. I know how much you mean to me, and how much I mean to you. Jacob smiled, a little sheepish. But I want to. I just wanted to say, thank you for choosing me, for loving me like you do. Lily's eyes shimmered with emotion. She leaned in and kissed the top of his head, just like she had so many times before. You never have to thank me, Jakey. You're my son, and loving you is the easiest thing I've ever done. Mark, sitting beside them, wrapped his arm around both of them, pulling them into a group hug. We're a family, he said softly, his voice full of pride. And nothing will ever change that. Jacob, sandwiched between his parents, felt the warmth of their love surround him. It was the same warmth he had felt that day, years ago, when Lily had first read those words to him. But now, as he sat there with his family, his mom, his dad, and his little sister, he understood them even more deeply. Family wasn't just a word or a promise made on a wedding day. It was the everyday moments, the laughter, the tears, the way they stood by each other no matter what. It was the love that filled their home, making it more than just a house. It was a place where they all belonged. And in Jacob's heart, he knew that Lily's vow to him that day wasn't just a promise. It was a bond that would last forever, unbreakable, as strong as the love they shared. Forever, just like she had promised. As Jacob grew older, he came to realize just how profound that promise had been. The years passed in a blur of school projects, soccer games, birthday parties, and family vacations. Through it all, Lily was there, her presence a constant source of love and guidance. And Mark, as always, was the steady, grounding figure in their lives, a father who had shown him what it meant to be kind, compassionate, and strong. When Jacob entered high school, the dynamics at home shifted again. He was now a teenager, with all the complications that came with growing up. Sometimes he felt distant from his family, as if he were navigating a world entirely separate from theirs. But even in those moments when he tried to pull away, Lily and Mark never let him stray too far. They gave him space when he needed it, but they were always there, ready to listen and support him. One evening, after a particularly hard day at school, Jacob sat on the porch steps, his head in his hands. He had gotten into an argument with a close friend, and the weight of schoolwork, social pressures, and his own insecurities felt overwhelming. He didn't notice Lily sitting down beside him until she gently placed her hand on his shoulder. "Hey," she said softly, her voice as warm and soothing as it had always been. "You okay?" Jacob didn't respond at first. He wasn't sure how to put into words what he was feeling, but after a moment he sighed and looked up at her, his eyes filled with frustration. "It's just everything. It's all so much sometimes." Lily nodded, her expression full of understanding. "Yeah, life can feel like that sometimes. But you don't have to go through it alone, you know. We're here for you." Jacob stared out at the darkening sky, the weight of her words sinking in. He had been so caught up in his own struggles that he had forgotten the very thing that had always been true. He wasn't alone. He had a family who loved him unconditionally, who had always been there for him, no matter what. "I know," he said quietly. I don't want to let you and Dad down." Lily's heart ached at his words. She reached out, tilting his chin so he would look at her. "You could never let us down, Jakey. We love you no matter what. It's okay to struggle. It's okay to be unsure. But you'll never have to face anything without us by your side." Tears welled up in Jacob's eyes, and he quickly wiped them away, embarrassed by his emotions. But Lily wasn't having any of that. She pulled him into a tight hug, holding him close just like she had when he was a little boy. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered into his hair. "I always have been. You've grown into an amazing young man, and nothing you do could ever change the way we feel about you." Jacob hugged her back, his chest tightening with a mixture of love and relief. He had needed to hear that more than he realized. For all his growing up, for all the independence he craved, he still needed the reassurance that he was loved, that he was seen, that he mattered. As they pulled away from the hug, Lily wiped a tear from her cheek and smiled at him. "You know, I meant every word of those vows I made to you all those years ago. I'll always be here for you, no matter what life throws your way." Jacob smiled back, the warmth of her words wrapping around him like a comforting blanket. "I know, Mom. I know." The years continued to pass, and before long, Jacob found himself standing on the cusp of adulthood. High school graduation came and went, and soon he was preparing to leave for college. It was a bittersweet time for the whole family. Mark and Lily were incredibly proud of him, but the thought of their firstborn leaving home tugged at their hearts. The night before Jacob was set to leave for university, the family gathered for dinner. It was a simple meal, but the atmosphere was heavy with emotion. Emma, now a lively 10-year-old, was unusually quiet, clearly struggling with the idea of her big brother being so far away. After dinner, as the dishes were cleared and the table was wiped clean, Mark suggested they all go sit outside on the porch, one last family moment before Jacob's departure. The four of them sat together, the cool night air brushing against their skin, the stars twinkling overhead. "I'm going to miss you, Jakey," Emma said softly, leaning her head against his shoulder. Jacob smiled, wrapping his arm around his little sister. "I'll miss you too, Em. But I'll come home to visit, I promise." Mark and Lily exchanged a glance, both of them feeling the weight of this moment. They had raised Jacob, watched him grow from a little boy into the incredible young man he had become. And now, they were sending him out into the world, trusting that the love and lessons they had given him would guide him through whatever came next. Lily broke the silence, her voice quiet but steady. "I'm so proud of you, Jacob. You've become everything I ever dreamed you would be, and more." Mark nodded in agreement, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You're going to do great things, son. We believe in you." Jacob felt a lump in his throat, overwhelmed by the emotions swirling inside him. He looked at the people sitting around him, his dad, his mom, and his little sister, and realized just how lucky he was. They had given him everything he needed, not just to succeed, but to thrive. And no matter where life took him, he knew that this, his family, would always be his anchor. "I love you guys," Jacob said, his voice thick with emotion. "We love you too," Lily replied, her smile soft and full of pride. That night, as Jacob lay in bed for the last time before heading off to college, he thought back to the day of the wedding. He could still see Lily kneeling in front of him, making that promise to love and care for him. He hadn't fully understood the significance of it back then, but now, he realized just how much that moment had shaped his life. Lily hadn't just become his stepmother, she had become his mom in every way that mattered. And now, as he prepared to step into a new chapter of his life, Jacob carried that promise with him, knowing that no matter where he went, no matter what challenges he faced, his family's love would always be there, just as it always had been. It wasn't the end of his story. It was only the beginning. And with the love of his family behind him, Jacob knew he could face anything that came his way. Forever, just like Lily had promised. As Jacob stood at the threshold of his future, ready to leave behind the home and family that had shaped him, he realized something profound, something that he would carry with him for the rest of his life. It wasn't just the support, the love, or even the words of encouragement that made his family so special. It was the unwavering promise they had made to one another, to be there, no matter what, to love unconditionally, not just in the big, obvious moments, but in the quiet ones too. The moments when love wasn't spoken, but shown in the simplest of ways. And that, Jacob knew, was the greatest lesson his family had taught him. Life wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about having all the answers or never making mistakes. It was about being there for the people you love, through the ups and downs, the triumphs and the failures. It was about showing up, time and time again, with kindness, patience, and a heart full of love. Family, Jacob realized, wasn't just about who you were related to by blood. It was about who stood by your side when life got hard. It was about the promises made and kept, even when things weren't easy. It was about choosing each other every single day and building something beautiful from that choice. In the end, Jacob understood that the vows Lily had written for him all those years ago weren't just a promise from one person to another. They were a testament to the power of love, commitment, and the belief that family is built on more than just biology. It's built on trust, understanding, and the unbreakable bonds formed through shared experiences, both joyful and difficult. As Jacob drove away the next morning, heading off to his new life at college, he felt a deep sense of peace. He knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, he would never face them alone. His family had given him the greatest gift of all, the knowledge that he was loved, just as he was, and that he always had a place to come back to, a home that would welcome him with open arms, no matter how far he wandered. For the listeners, the lesson was clear. Family isn't defined by blood, but by the love, loyalty, and commitment you show to one another. It's about making promises and keeping them through thick and thin. It's about being there, even when it's hard, and showing up for the people you care about, over and over again. No matter where life takes you or what challenges you face, remember that the strength of a family comes from the love you build together. And that love, if nurtured and cherished, can last forever. Just like Lily had promised Jacob, forever.